Hey,
Hi.
well, welcome to What Could Go Wrong Live. We are here again, meeting up again to talk about social emotional learning and education systems. So I'm excited. We had Elaine on at, like the beginning of this, maybe first or second or third episode, I want to say. You came here with us and you're doing it all over again. So it must not have been so bad.
Oh, it's fabulous. I'm happy to be back. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. So last episode, we talked a little bit about we talked very student-centered, like social emotional learning for students, what a trauma-informed environment looks like. And then it kind of led us into, well, what does that mean for educators? And that was a whole different conversation. So we're going to touch back on that now. But first, I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us about why you're excited about this conversation and what you do.
Sure. Well, I don't even think you know this yet, Chelsea, but when I was 14 years old, we used to get these publisher clearinghouse communication in the mail. And they had those magazines, and each little sticker was a different magazine that you could subscribe to. Do you remember that, or are you too young for that?
I don't remember that.
You don't remember that. So you would get a bunch of stickers in the mail, and they were all different magazines to subscribe to. This was pre-internet, right? So when I was 14, my mom said, choose two magazines, because she wanted me to be practicing reading and stuff. So
right.
I think I chose some girl magazine, Girl Talk, or something like that. But the other one that I chose to have sent to me at my house on subscription was Psychology Today. So that's a little
of course it was.
14-year-old, and that really was the beginning of my interest in people in general. Like, what are people about? How do they behave? How do they learn and grow? And how can we support that? So from the time I was 14, I've been reading about people and how they change and grow and how they behave. And that led me into that emotional part of growth, right? Being more familiar with thinking about how can we help children and adolescents with their social and emotional learning, and then how to support the educators as well with their well-being and being able to support them as well. So that's kind of like where I've come from, and my entire career since then has been about working with kids primarily, but also working with leaders, educational leaders, and leaders in some mental health programs to advance this well-being that we want for the staff and for the kids. So that's how we are here today. We're coming here.
I love that.
Pick that up.
I think I would have been right there with you on the Psychology Today and some kind of girly magazine, because I think that's a great mix. I mean, my background is child development, so I love that, how their brain develops, why it develops the way it does, how we can kind of guide their development in different ways. I love all of that nerdy stuff. And so this concept, I think, goes into those pieces, and it's just really interesting to me. So we had talked before, like we said, about creating a safe space for students, trauma-informed environments, how to promote their social emotional learning, the importance of social emotional learning, all those types of things in our previous conversation. And the more that we talked about it, just like the more that we've seen it today in what's going on with schools, the more we know that that's putting a lot of pressure on teachers. Because if you are going to create a social emotional space, a safe social emotional learning space, as well as a trauma-informed space and all those types of things, you have to have that to give, which can be really hard, especially now. And so that's what we coming back to talk about who's supporting the educators, what does that look like, where does that come from, who's supposed to even do it, and those types of things. So we're going to jump in with one of the first questions is, everybody's talking about creating a student-centric environment, right? That's really important. We want our environments to really circle around students. But can we be student-centric and educator-centric at the same time? What do you think?
That's an excellent question. And I think that we can. And I don't know that we can be fully student centric if we don't have, as we're calling it in this conversation, if we don't have some teacher centric aspect of what we're doing in schools. Because if the teachers aren't supported, then they will have a much more difficult time supporting the students. So we need to have the leadership supporting the teachers who can then support the students, because there's that quote that says you can't fill someone else's cup from an empty cup. You have to be able to gather that for yourself as well. So the question then becomes, well, whose responsibility is that, right? Whose responsibility is it to find that balance between caring for the students and supporting them, but then also supporting the teachers in a way that they can bring their best selves to their work. So I think we can do both.
Yeah, and that can be really challenging because it's a balancing game, right? We have to pour out a lot to the students, but educators have to be poured into. So you can't be fully student centric without being educator centric. And it's like, how do they all fit together to get this perfect balance in there? So I think then the big question is, if we know that educators need to have that support and they need to be poured into so that they can then pour out to students to create these types of spaces, who does that leave pouring into the educator?
Right. Well, that's a big question, an ongoing question. And I wanted to mention that I brought some
Is
gifts.
it sparkly?
Yes, it is. Some
Excellent.
in this about that. And I think that balance and that responsibility comes from a number of different ways. We talk about how educators are supported. And first we need to think about, what do we mean by support? So like, I'd like to invite your listeners to say, the question being, what do you define support as? So if someone said, you're really, what is your version of support? How do you feel supported? What is it that happens that leaves you in a state of feeling supported? What do you think, listeners? What do you think?
No pressure, y'all.
No pressure.
Ready, set, go. Come on, Michael. I know you have something to say about that.
What do we mean
or William?
We're going to support the teachers. We're going to support the students. But when we are specifically now talking about supporting teachers, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that sound like? How about you?
Oddly quiet.
People are thinking.
Oh, here we go.
And teamwork. Okay, Kristen, good to see you on with us. Buy-in and teamwork. Absolutely. So what do you think?
I think buy-in is huge.
Okay. So when you think about buy-in, Chelsea, like what comes to mind for you? Like buy-in meaning what? Like, what does that mean?
I mean, I think buy-in in so many different ways can look like we're all on the same page. We're all coming from the same place. We have the same mission, the same focus.
Exactly.
We're aligned.
Yeah, that does feel supportive, because even when you hear about those things, if we're aligned in that way among the teachers and then with the administrative teams and people in leadership who are supporting that, we feel like we're on the same team. Exactly. Yeah. William is also saying buy-in as well. Michael's saying, eating lunch. Sorry, hold on. I actually thought that when Michael said eating lunch, I thought, yeah, that's support. That, teachers have the opportunity to eat a lunch.
I mean, I used to eat a granola bar while running through the hallways. I mean, so I
Absolutely.
think if someone would have said, hey, I'm going to cover this, so you go sit down and eat lunch, that would totally be it. So Michael, you are dead on.
Absolutely. That was the feedback I got, having been an administrator, is that one of the most coolest thing that I could do as a building principal was kind of step into class to allow the teacher to take,
Yeah, seriously.
some water, or, just unexpectedly, that
Go to the bathroom.
exactly. It's like that feels supportive to them. So listening to students and filling needs. Okay. So when you're listening, you get to hear what it is people need, and then you're able to then meet that need. Let's see.
Kristen says appropriate training for new program and
Oh my
curricula.
goodness.
That's a
Right.
huge one.
Yeah. So isn't it the most unsupportive thing? And I've been a teacher. I've been on the teacher side. I've been on the principal side. As a teacher, one of the most unsupportive things that you can experience in a school or organization is you're asked to do something, but you don't have the tools to do it. You don't have the resources. You don't have the training. You don't have the time. That is an example of that not feeling supported. You're on the other side of that. So we definitely we definitely know what that feels like as well. So support different for different people.
Yeah, I was going to say, William said exactly, if the school admin wants one thing, but the boots on the ground want another, we're not on the same page. Curriculum, students, books, emotional support, etc. That back to that buy-in, back to that, we're all on the same page with the same mission, same goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there's pressure from the ground up to teachers, from what the students are bringing in their classrooms. And then there's pressure from the top down, whether it's from the school administrators. And again, flipping to the administrator side, I can tell you that school administrators, there are things coming down on school administrators as well around compliance and, things that need to be checked off.
Yeah.
Compliance, and then there's pressure there. So then the teachers are in between, and we have to find that balance. So part of the answer to the question around who's responsible for supporting teachers, I mean, I think there is a lot to be said about how the leaders support the teachers. What do they do? How do the teachers feel like they're supported? And again, it comes back to that same perspective of, what does it mean for you to feel supported? And it's very important for leaders to know that. And then for teachers to be able to express what it is they need as well. And it's a negotiation, there's always a balance to be struck. And sometimes, we want to do what's best for the kids, but we don't want to do that at the expense of the adults.
Right.
But we also want to do what's best for the adults to support them, but we don't want that to be at the expense of the kids in the classroom.
Yeah.
So it's like a balance, lots of components coming and going, and we need to find that balance for sure.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is modeling, right? We know that modeling is big in the classroom. We know that in order to have our students or learners to do something, we model that action for them rather than tell them what to do and doing something different. I think it's the same for administration teams who want their teachers to be creating this trauma-informed social emotional learning space, that then they are modeling that behavior for the teachers, and then they're learning through that way. They're learning through I'm seeing this happen, and then I'm able to mirror it, rather than I'm just being told to do this but not experiencing it for myself.
That goes back to exactly what day-to-day social emotional learning looks like. It's what are the adults modeling themselves, and what does that look like to be healthy? I like William's question, who supports the admin team? Their stress can be high as well, which can trickle down. And absolutely. It's funny because this morning I just read an article, and I'll show you. It says it is a snapshot of school leaders' health and well-being in a horror year. And they go on and
horror year
statistics This is a magazine, an educational magazine that came out of Australia, but I think it speaks to everyone. And they give lots of examples of, too many working hours, concern for personal safety was huge. But we can also say that it's not just for the leaders, the teachers feel the same thing. But William's question is, you know, who supports them? And there are people like me, actually, whose love is to reach out and be able to support principals and to support leaders in their work. So having communities of learning for the leadership teams and the principals, because there's always somebody that needs to, take care of the leaders. Somebody's got to take care of the leaders. Leaders have to be in a position to be able to support the teachers, and then the teachers are then in a position to support the students. So it's an entire system.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And then Kristen it kind of expands it out to the wider learning community. She talks about, I think parents need in on that support conversation as well for everyone to be on the same page, which is absolutely correct, because it is a learning community. I mean, it's made up of all of the parts and it requires all of the parts to function. So what do you think about parents being involved in that?
Absolutely. They're part of the system. They're an extension of the child, right? We look at children and adolescents as being in the center of their galaxy. So the student's in the center, and then all around the student are all these different pieces and parts that make up their galaxy: their school, their church, their family members, a special aunt or uncle who pays extra attention to them, a group that they meet with in terms of Boys and Girls Club. There are all these other pieces that are included, and the parents absolutely are right there in the center with the child. And sometimes the way we need to support the child is to also support the parents and the family, because they're not separate, right? We need to engage the parents. And some kids are really fortunate and have a rich galaxy of support for them. And it's the same thing with teachers. Some teachers are very fortunate to have this galaxy of support around them to be able to bring their best every day. But just like the kids don't always have a lot of supports in their galaxy, sometimes the teachers don't either. So that's where the community comes into play, and having lots of connections. We've seen how important that is now to support, because there's been so much isolation and distance over this past year, especially.
Yeah. Here's another one. Teachers need to support their leaders. Leaders need to hear and be checked in on by their team as much as teachers need to be supported by leaders. Relationship building and support is a two-way street, for sure. And it all comes down to relationship, which is always dual-sided. And so I love that. I mean, the answer to pretty much everything that you most likely will ask me is relationship in some way. It's like, how do we do this relationship? How do we do that? Probably with a relationship.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So what does relationship building look like in your opinion, or how have you seen that function? And when you're creating these types of environments and looking for these systems to start working within each other, what are some tools for that relationship building?
I think, stealing a phrase from Brene Brown, I think we all want to be seen. We want to be seen. And we want to be able to be who we are and be vulnerable and be seen by another human being. And so you think about that from the teacher's perspective. Teachers want to be seen and heard, and the connection and the relationship between the teacher and the leader, in the school, that needs to be a two-way street, open communication as well. And I know there are different styles and different opinions about how that happens, but if we come back to this idea that the relationship is the key, then that needs to be nurtured. And I like that Jennifer said teachers need to support their leaders, and then leaders also support their teachers. It's a two-way street there. So, and then when that is happening, then the teachers are in a better position to build those stronger relationships with the students so that they can also feel supported and safe, and then be able to get to the learning that needs to happen on any given day.
Right. For sure. I think that's a huge part of it, understanding all of that. So, um, that covers kind of who's responsible for supporting educators. And that's a multifaceted answer because it's not just one piece, or it's not just the administrator, just the parent, just this, just that. It's kind of, I think it's comes back to building a quality learning community that then is all supporting each other through everything. But most tangibly, and when I was in administration, it was a lot of it was on me to model the behavior that I wanted the educators to model in the classroom. And so I think it's kind of both sided. You can answer it and say it's the responsibility of the learning community as a whole to all support each other, which I think is accurate. But I think so much of it falls back to the administration. It's responsible for you to set the tone and to create kind of that model that then can be reciprocated. Because if there's no tone set from quote unquote the top, which I don't believe in hierarchical, I mean, I always talk about having a round team, but in this instance, if there's no tone set from the leadership, then there's nothing to be reciprocated. There's nothing to be mirrored. So it's important that it comes from that leadership in that way. So I think who's responsible for supporting educators, and tell me if you agree, but I think it's the learning community and most heavily the administration.
It does, the leaders have a huge impact, and that support and that environment, that context that we're talking about, that we want in the community to be supportive for students, for teachers, and for and among leaders and among teachers and among students, that is something that we, we pay attention to so that the community can be supportive of one another. So that, that we have like the community care. And then along with that, we have people doing individual self-care as well.
Right.
And we know that when that support is happening, I had consulted in a school once where the culture in the building was, people's lunches were seeming to be always working lunches, staff didn't have a chance to get away. But it was modeled by the administrator in that building that, there was always a tone to the communication that said, if you don't take a break and you're staying after school and you're working all these long hours and you work on the weekends, that martyrdom was applauded. And so it put the teachers in a really rough spot. Whereas in another building, I saw the principal there, Mr. Bird, he had his little lunch every day. He created a nice space for the teachers and the staff to have, so they can kind of get away and be in an environment to kind of regenerate and get their breath, caught their breath.
Right.
Their breath, I'm out of breath here, but they catch their breath. And it was beautiful because it was modeled by the principal. The teachers felt comfortable and didn't feel like they had to live up to some really ridiculous,
unattainable standard.
Standard. And then there was lots of great things that happened in that space when the principal was there having lunch, and the teachers felt comfortable coming and sitting and talking because there's that relationship building again.
Yeah. And it's organic. It's not like we're going to come to this professional development and this is your, mingling time. And it's just this organic, natural way for them to create a real relationship.
Absolutely. And then that trickles down to the teacher. I've seen administrators who on in-service days always made sure that there was there was food, there was a good breakfast, something to eat. Like in principal school, they taught us, if you're doing professional development, you must have food. That was kind of like the thing.
That's a given, I feel like. What are you even doing if you don't have food and coffee?
Exactly. So we would, set up, bring flowers, tablecloths. Of course, you have to get there at like 6 a.m. to set everything.
I remember those days. Yes.
The administrator, you did that. But one of the most beautiful outcomes that came from that was that, we always have in the first week of May, we have Teacher Appreciation Week, right?
Yep.
And we all know that teachers need to be appreciated every other week of the year, not just Appreciation Week. But we had done a teacher appreciation as a way of support and relationship building with the staff. And then a couple of weeks later, Mrs. Johnson did a student appreciation day for the students in her class.
Oh, I love that.
So that doesn't happen in the absence of some support being shown to them.
Right.
So I thought that was such a beautiful example of how the different layers in a school or in an organization, you know, how all of that lines up. And
yeah,
that was a
Kristen says, oh, I love that. Kristen says, definitely not the same as being told to grab a muffin at home when there are no muffins at home. Like, seriously, these are real things.
Right. Bring your own coffee. Stop at
Starbucks to bring your stuff. I mean, we made a big deal out of our we had once a month kind of trainings where we all got together and we did lesson plan. We had like a training at the beginning and then we did lesson planning. And we had teams that were broken up because we were in early education. So we had like the 2s team, the 3s team, the 4s team, the 5s team. And each of them would take a week and they got a budget from the school, or take a month, and they got a budget from the school, and it was this competition of who's going to do the most elaborate thing. So they would come up there, and we had ovens and stuff at the school, right? So they would be making pancakes and decorating this and doing that and picking up coffee and all these things. And so it became this really fun thing that we all looked forward to because we knew there was going to be amazing food. We knew there was going to be coffee, these are the important things, you know, and then we hung out and we lesson planned together, and it was kind of that organic time. And it was just something that we all looked forward to. And I think that's an important piece, is making it relational instead of always being this, I hate the word professional, but instead of being professional, making it relational is a big thing. And never telling them to just bring a muffin from home, because there are never muffins at home. I think Kristen is dead on right there.
You are out of luck if you have no muffins at home. Absolutely.
There are never muffins at my house. My children will have, if there were muffins, my children have already eaten them. So you can guarantee that there will be no muffins for me to bring with me to the training. So
exactly. Well, that's supportive. Like, even talking about these experiences, I think finding out what people experience as supportive in the school, whether it's the leaders, you know, and those that are helping support the leaders, and then the leaders then are able to support the teachers, and the teachers can in turn be able to support. And so there's this community of care. I like to call it a community care, which is I think part of, or maybe the opposite of, when we hear about self-care, right? So we're talking whose responsibility is it? We've been talking about having a two-way street, teachers supporting their leaders creating the space for that relationship building and support for the staff, including on an emotional level. Now, some may disagree with that, but teaching is an emotional endeavor.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Able to respond to that was the opening sentence to a book chapter I wrote a few years ago. So
it's dead on,
you know. But you know, to be able to respond to that emotional part, and especially now, how many emotions are going everywhere. Teachers are nervous about coming back, and they're excited at the same time. They're anxious, they're worried, all these emotions are coming together. So it's important to hold that space for that supportive environment. So then the question is, where does self-care come into play, and how does that relate? And here's another question, folks, listeners. I'm going to pose another question to you. What do you think of when you hear the term self-care? What do you
think? Michael's done with lunch yet, or do you think he's still eating?
Self-care, right? So what do we think? There's a lot of conversation out there now about self-care, not just for educators, but for all of us. What does it mean to engage in self-care?
Oh,
What
I
do you
have
think,
thoughts.
Kelsey?
Let's see.
Yeah.
And I think it's highly individualized, just like everything else is self-care for you may not be self-care for me. Look, Michael thinks self-care is sleeping, which is absolutely accurate. I think.
Yeah, 7 to 9 hours a night. I mean, there's only
uh,
15% of people in the world that can be fine on 5 hours of sleep and like really be fine with 5 hours. The rest of us need 7 to 9 hours. And
right.
that's like an ongoing thing. And yet, how often do we trade our sleep for other pursuits that we think are more important?
Very
And
often. Very, very
yeah,
often.
yeah, Michael is supporting naps as well. Yeah.
And nap whenever you can.
Yeah, he needs
Yes.
time in the classroom.
I
Well,
remember in early education, right? We still have nap time. So we would be in
absolutely.
there and the lights are dimmed and we're rocking or rubbing backs or whatever. And I'd have to walk in and be like, "Are you guys still awake? Are the children sleeping or are
That's
you
right.
sleeping? Because you turn the lights down, turn on some lullabies,
Oh
and the
yeah,
teachers are like holding their eyes open."
I know. I know.
Like,
They need to get their sleep for sure. All right.
Kristen
So, yeah,
says mentally checking out and doing what makes you happy. Yes, fresh air is always good as well. Absolutely. Mentally checking out and doing what makes you happy is so right, and that's highly individualized because mentally checking out for one person is different for the other one, right? I
it
mean,
is.
so that's an individualized version of self-care. Let's see. William says, "True, it's based on you, working out, golf, sports, no phone or social media, shutting the brain off." My brain doesn't shut off. What does that feel like, William? I'm not sure that I've ever quite experienced that. But it
Well,
sounds nice.
it's actually, people are different. I'm a proponent for shutting the brain down at some point as
Yeah.
well. So just saying, Chelsea, we might need to
How
talk
does that work? We do need to talk,
about
figure out
down
how that
so we
happens.
can disconnect and just shut your brain down for a while so you can generate. But it is true that as you said earlier, it's individualized and people have to find what works for them. You know, introverts like me, recharge by stepping away and having alone time, having quiet time to myself, not having to respond to too many people. So I recharge as an introvert by pulling back. So I do things on my own. I'll walk on my own. I'll run on my own. I do things on my own. I'll sit and write by myself at the park or something like that. But for some people, that recharging that we expect to get from self-care involves involving other people. Like my brother Greg, he's so different than me. It's like when I am trying to recharge, I feel supported and I feel like I'm doing a whole lot of good self-care for myself, when I'm on my own. He, on the other hand, he needs to be with other people. He needs to connect. He needs to, be around a lot of people and go to parties and have pool parties with, a lot of people. So it's important to find what it is that works for you and you explore different things of what that means.
Dean says meditation. Jacob says sitting on the dock of the bay. So
Yes,
that's one.
wrong with that lyric.
There could be a song. What is in this beautiful box that you have? I need to know what's in this sparkly box.
Sparkly box. Okay, so we're talking about self-care. And first we talked about community care and everyone being responsible in the community to support one another, to build relationships, to find out what's supportive and what feels supportive to one another. But then we also, need to explore what it is that is good for our own self-care. And I have a template for anyone who is interested. I have a self-care plan template that you can use to kind of go through different aspects of the type of self-care you need, whether it's physical self-care. Immediately we think physical self-care, right? That's like the
Right.
number one thing. People say we're going to work out, we're going to get enough sleep, we're going to eat, we're going to take naps. We think about the physical. So along with the physical, here are my probiotic gummies. These are really
vitamins.
like vitamins. Yeah, whatever is helpful to you to help that physical side. So this is one of those things for me. It's like it helps my stomach a lot. Some people don't like that, but I keep that in my box. I also have taken to being very careful to make sure I am taking calcium to keep my bones strong. And it seems so simple. And sometimes a day, days will pass and all I need to do is unwrap this, one of these little chocolate things.
They're chocolate?
Yeah, they're chocolate. Milk chocolate.
Excellent. Oh my gosh. That's the best type of self-care. Anything that involves
right? Oh yeah, and regular
chocolate.
That's right. Right, exactly. But sometimes it gets so crazy that I have to like physically put it somewhere where I can see it, because sometimes life can get overwhelming and then, I don't do that physical self-care. Another thing that I have in my little box that when I think of self-care, and again, it's something small and it doesn't have to be expensive or take a lot of time, but it works for me. I love these things. Emergency. Have you ever had
Oh,
that?
yeah, I like those.
You pour it in a cup with some cold water. I always use ice water and drink it. And, you got to drink some kind of water. You should be drinking water. That's another form of physical self-care. But we've got these, emergency things that really boost your immune system, so that you can do all that type of rigor. But beyond physical care, what other type of self-care can you think about? What other type of self-care?
I mean, I don't know. I feel like reading is self-care to me, but I don't know. Is that considered physical?
I think that you can put it in whatever category works for you. I think
Excellent.
that it could fall. Yeah. I mean, if you see that as physical, that's great. That is something that engages your mind. So you could be, caring for yourself by reading something. And so it could be affecting your psychological space, self-care for how you're thinking and feeling. That could fit into something related to self-care on the mental health aspect that can support, what you're reading is something that's kind of putting some positive types of thoughts and thinking in your mind as well. Oh, and then jumping back to the physical, we had someone put in going for a walk. Absolutely. I actually went for a walk around the block before we started chatting today, and it was beautiful. It's cold, but here in Cleveland, Ohio, but taking a walk, if that works. Some people don't like to take walks.
I love walks.
Yeah.
I'm all about it.
For you. So what else? Let's see. Walks we had. What other domains might we think about when we talk about self-care?
I mean, I think when Dean talks about meditation, we're talking about mental.
Yeah,
something.
Absolutely. So important these days. And it is very self-caring. The purpose of meditation is to be able to slow down enough and just observe, create some space between what you're thinking and whatever your response might be, but being able to be aware of what your thoughts are and what your feelings are without judgment. That's really the key word.
It's hard.
It is hard. And that's why they talk about, my yoga teacher talks about meditation practices, because it's something like a muscle that you have to practice doing. And it's not, using dumbbells, but it's this idea of how to redirect your mind and to be able to observe yourself without judgment. And that's the key word. It's not self-care if you're meditating and you're just thinking thoughts and saying, I'm, horrible because
I've tried that. It doesn't work.
Well, and for some people it doesn't work. For some people it needs more practice.
So. Oh, no, I mean, judging yourself while you're trying to meditate does not work.
Oh, it does.
No.
Oh,
Let's say setting boundaries when it comes to social media or electronics, a cutoff time every day or a certain time of the week where the outside world can't reach you, no exception. That's for real. I have an app on my phone that like shuts
mhm.
down at a certain time.
Yeah.
Kristen says affirmations, posting a post-it with a positive message to your mirror. This can be both mental and spiritual and be modeled for
Mhm.
students. I love affirmations. I use them my daily for myself. I use them for my girls.
Mhm.
Um, I think those are perfect.
Absolutely. I have another thing in my box here that I is a go-to for me every day, and that's this
Gratitude. Yes.
gratitude.
That's a huge one.
This, and I make it super easy. And trust me, when I had all three of our kids living at home before they graduated from college and stuff, we had three kids in 5 years, so we had a lot of stuff going on. So there are really like huge gaps in what I actually recorded, but uh, it's a half a page. It's just like this much. And sometimes I can't even, think of that much. And sometimes I'll just draw a picture of what I'm grateful for. Or I'll write a little haiku poetry, to capture some of those thoughts. But to come back to that, because, feeling and expressing and attending to your gratitude pushes out a lot of other things that could be coming across your mind, as you're going through your day. So that's another form
Hmm.
of
And
self-care.
these are all great things that we can model for students.
Exactly. Expressing gratitude. So in here, I'm writing about it. So students could write, have their, teachers have lots of different ways that you can incorporate gratitude, whether it's oral expression, whether it's receptive language, expressive language, whether it has to do with art, whether it has to do with exploring gratitude through books. Teachers can do a lot of number of things. So at the same time, we're talking about this is good for teachers to do for themselves as well. And the really good leaders that I've worked with over the years have a way that the staff and the teachers can express gratitude to one another in a public way. So, you see
Yeah.
boards where, shout out to so and so for, stepping in for me when I had to take a call about my child who was sick, or
Hmm.
happening among the teachers, and then also creating that community within the classroom to be able to do the same thing, to express that gratitude.
Yeah,
Um,
we had something like that at the when I was in an administrative role, a
yeah,
way to for public expression. But we did have we did the five languages of love concept of how do you
yeah,
like things. And there were teachers that said, if you ever stand up in front of the team and tell everybody that I did a good job for this or post my name on something, I will leave immediately. It was
you
like,
know,
okay.
my story as well. There was a teacher, Mrs. Geraci, actually, she had done something amazing. She was always such an amazing teacher, very patient, and brought her best. And so we were in a staff meeting, and I recognized her, I expressed gratitude towards her, and I, um, you know, it was important in principal school. They teach us to recognize people publicly. And she
Hmm.
was gracious, but then right after the staff meeting, she came up to me. She said, Miss Harper, please don't do that to me again. I
Yeah.
was really uncomfortable. It was not a supportive. It did not feel supportive. And I felt
I did
so
not feel appreciated when you did
it
that.
did not feel supported in that. It had opposite effect. And then all I could say as a leader was, I'm so sorry. And that's why I keep
Hmm.
going back to saying you need to know what support looks like
Yeah.
for a child. What does it look
Hmm.
like to be supportive to the child? What does it look like for a teacher to be supported? What does the
Right.
leader feel, how they experience support? So you have to know that. And then one more thing I wanted to share, as our time is winding down, is my friend Cami Guarino um, has a resilience journal. So it's an
Oh, I
opportunity
love that.
for self-reflection, right? And each day there is a place to set intention. There's a place to express gratitude. There's a place to navigate through lots of noise and chaos and be able to focus on something specific. And then it also gives you some mindful tips. And then also it gives you a space to indicate, what you're going to release. Like what do you let go on that day?
Yeah, that's a big one, is actually letting things, releasing things out. You can only take in so much before you have to let
Right.
something out. There's a
Teachers are
maximum.
phenomenal about the to-do list, but you also have to have
Right.
a don't list.
I don't have one of those. I should probably get one.
Probably get one.
I love just the very down to earth responses, that everything doesn't have to be this huge piece where you have to go through 20 layers before you can experience self-care, or you can experience being supported, because being supported can't always come from external sources. When we
Right.
talk about the need of students to be supported by teachers and teachers to be supported by the learning or the community as a whole, as well as administration, and where does administration supports come from? We need external support. We know that, but we can't be fully reliant on external support. And so we know that having high quality self-care practices is also important, because if you are not taking care of yourself and you're fully expecting it to come from external, you'll be let down every time, because
Absolutely.
that can't be, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be, like Jenny talked about earlier, about it being a two-way road, right? When educators and administrators have to support each other through relationship, I think there's maybe another lane to that road, right? You have to also be caring for yourself. And that was a conversation that I had with my staff when I was in administration, was, I was the opposite of the one who was always supporting martyrdom, right? It was like, if you are here 15 minutes longer than you are supposed to be, then let me know and I will help you get it done so you can get out. Because I needed them to get out and come back ready to do what they were going to do. And if they had a day off, you have a day off. Don't text me, don't call me. Like, I knew, because I was a teacher, that they needed that part of their lives. They needed it. And it was important for me as an administrator to protect that for them. Because it can be hard to protect it for yourself. You feel like, I'm not doing enough, or, they're going to think that I'm lazy or I'm slacking or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, that's not the case. So I think it has to be a full response. The full learning community includes yourself. It is not just the administration, not just the parents, the students, the teachers. It includes yourself. So what are you doing to support yourself in that role as well? And then how are you expressing that to the people who are expecting support from? And that's my whole rant. That's, I could just jump off that soapbox.
Or, I think you share the self-care plan template. Chelsea, maybe if you could put my email address in the chat. It's Elaine.
Oh yeah, tell me.
Elaine Harper, PhD at hotmail.com. And if you're interested in, I'll send it to you free. It's a template that I've used with my staff over the years as a way to create that community, to establish that caring culture, and to help teachers know how to be able to help students in the same way. So that kind of taps back into our social emotional learning about how we take care of our feelings. Also, how we talk to ourselves. That's another piece of self-care that I think
I'm working on that one.
You've got to be compassionate to yourself, because self-care involves, what are you telling yourself, internally. So being aware of that is important as well.
For sure. So we threw it in there. There's your website with the contact page, and then here's your email. So be sure to reach out for her. Where else can people find you if they're looking for more information about what you do and social emotional learning and all that?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. We come through that way. So, and you've got my website, my email address. I'll be doing some work A presentation 2 weeks from today on March 26th is going to be International SEL Day, Social Emotional Learning Day, where I'm going to be doing a presentation free of charge as part of the celebration of International SEL Day. And you can get more information about that on selday.org. You can go
I
and
learned
see
about that last time you were on my show. I didn't know this was a thing, and I'm so excited about it now.
it is the thing. We're coming together to advance that type of work. And it's not just SEL for the kids, it's SEL for the adults as well. Because we all need that connection, that relationship, and that support.
I love that. So I think we could continue this conversation forever and ever because it's kind of support and self-care could just go on and on and on and on and on.
Absolutely.
But I think we've covered some really great pieces,
Mhm.
and I've already jumped on my soapbox. Did you have any last soapbox rants that you wanted to
Hey,
go on?
I think self-care includes community care and caring
Mm-hmm.
for one another. We can't be supportive to our teachers if the leaders are not supportive to the teachers. Teachers can't be as supportive to their students if they're not getting that support from their leaders. So it's
Sure.
what we call a parallel process. It flows up and
Yeah.
down the school district or the organization in terms of what's actually happening on the ground. It's reflected on many levels.
It's true. It really is. And I think that learning community is so important. And then remembering that the community involves yourself, whatever role you play, parent, educator, administrator, student. I mean, the community, don't forget that it includes you. So self-care is a huge part of that. And I'm still working on that. So just take
You
your
know what?
time, get some chocolate vitamins.
Yeah, and sometimes you switch up, but we're always working on it because sometimes something doesn't work anymore or your life changes and you
Right.
get a different position maybe, or there's an addition to your family, or you end up married or with a partner, or you move somewhere new. There are always changes that happen in our lives that are good points for us to stop and reflect to say, what is it that to recognize what it is that we need um,
Hmm.
to be able to take care of ourselves and then take care of those around us as well.
For sure. So I love this conversation. I think it's a great wrap up to our initial conversation. We were talking about supporting students. So now we've kind of covered all of those pieces in there. Maybe we'll have to come back and talk about parents because a lot of it could apply, but I think there's some special pieces that it could apply about how
Absolutely.
parents in a learning community, how you can provide a social emotional learning space in your
Right.
family or in your home, which is a whole different it's a whole different thing because it's not in the classroom, so it looks different.
Yeah, and it's multifaceted, going towards the same objective.
For sure. So I host this through Restream, which is my very favorite because it lets me do this on all the different channels, so people can comment on Twitch and LinkedIn and Facebook, and it casts on YouTube. So that's really exciting. So I love getting to use this platform and doing all of that. And I will be back next week with my next What Could Go Wrong live with somebody awesome, but I can't remember right now. So, but thank you, Elaine, for hanging out and sharing your expertise on these topics. And
Well,
as always, it's amazing. And we'll have to for sure do it again.
absolutely.
Thank you
Anytime.
guys for being a part.